There you go.
You are live. That's what my camera's telling me now, so I'm assuming it's true. I wanted to give you an update here because this is the first time that I have been virtually unsupervised in my studio. You know, I do these rants at home, but now we're upgrading to the Lance rant from the studio, and soon we'll be on the regular big studio stage. But I want to give you this breaking news. I think this is really big. Now, we've been obviously watching with great anxiety as we see the news about the border flying open, and of course, this I could list for you these bizarre, developments that are happening. From I think 10% of the people tested in the COVID vans that are coming over are actually COVID vans. I meant to say the caravans, but you see, that was Freudian because it's like COVID vans because 10% of the people are coming over testing positive. This is the hypocrisy, and one could almost say the intentional lunacy. If not, how would you describe it when Trump had the problem contained and the Democrats are barely there, 50 days and they've already screwed up the border? You have to think it's intentional. Of course, they're going into Texas, which they hate. The reason they're going to Texas, a lot of the caravans, is because they couldn't walk into Florida. Florida was their first choice, but then they'd have to have boats to do that. So what we have is this moment when H.R. 1, this law that is going to essentially federalize all of the mischief of no documented voters and ballot harvesting that went on in the last election. And Donald Trump called in, I think it was yesterday, gave a very passionate and very direct accusation saying that the election was stolen in Georgia. And I know I can't say that. You see, I'm saying what Donald Trump said. And he said that it was largely because of the cowardice of the courts, who never would review the case on the evidence, but only on standing only. Now, you guys know that story, right? So I'm not repeating anything. I'm putting they want to do this election rigging as a national priority so that they can do that. Then, of course, they can legalize, 15 to 20 million illegal votes, plus have a whole flood open up in this. So basically, they're making it sure that the American people who vote Republican and care about their nation will be a permanent non-entity. Bad enough that they want to label you as a domestic terrorist, when in fact, by definition, I suppose, the terrorist is the person who's intentionally wreaking destruction on other people. It's more like what they're doing. But be that as it may, being the charitable Christian audience that you are, and being the students of the Great Awakening as well as students of the Great Apocalypse, we have to ask ourselves, where are we? Well, here's the good news. Some good news. The good news is that there is a built-in line to how far the Lord is allowing the mischief to go. I remember Matthew Henry once said that the devil prowls as a roaring lion, but the Lord does keep him on a short chain, meaning Satan can go just as far as he's allowed to go. He has apparently been allowed to go enough, I think, to begin to display the real nature of the evil that we're up against so that the nation can have its awakening. Remember, half the people of the country, you might say stolen election. It doesn't matter. If half the people voted for this in the Senate, half the representation in the Senate is what they voted for. Half the people in Congress is what they voted for. Not every state is using, the Dominion software, so you can't say the Dominion is controlling every election because there's ones that Republicans win in certain states. Texas refused to use the software. So that's probably why they're trying to flood in with immigrants. But they got a problem because sometimes when the immigrants come in, when the illegals come in as immigrants, illegals, they given a little time, they actually start to turn Republican. Did you know that? Because first of all, not everybody that's fleeing here for hope in a future wants to go back to what they left. How many of them want to go to communism, Marxism, and you have to work with, the same shenanigans they were trying to get out of? They're leaving to get here, not to go back to where they were. So I think there's actually an opportunity in a lot of this that is, we have a harvest coming to our shores. And it might be that the moment that the left sees that this harvest comes in and is evangelized, they already come with Catholic values. If they're pro-life and they start voting for their own prosperity rather than criminal redistribution of wealth with low-paying wages for everybody, I think you might see a whole lot of them becoming the Trump voters, which is what happened. Trump made strides with minorities that the Republicans never made, and the Democrats feared losing. That's why they're trying to rig the elections, as far as I'm concerned. But you're not allowed to say that. But we just said it. So now you have to ask yourself the question: is there any other news? What's the leash? Well, the leash is HR 1 doesn't necessarily have to get through. They would have to enact a removal of a thing called a filibuster. So many of these words are not normal for us because we're all getting a civics lesson. I believe God's been giving us a civics lesson ever since Donald Trump went into office. Did I know about the Electoral College, the state legislators? Who ever heard of the CDC, the DOJ? I knew about the FBI and the CIA. I didn't know about the NDS and the blah, 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 blah. Everything's a three-letter deal with Washington. But we're all getting educated in all this stuff, all of it. And why do you think that is? I think it's because God wants us to take America back. He wants to take America back. What you're seeing is the wood, the hay, and the stubble is getting burned up in terms of the corruption is exposed, the facade is coming down, the veil is being removed, and no longer do you have like the Wizard of Oz, ignore the man behind the curtain. The curtain's torn open. We see the little guy there. Hey, hey, hey. And we know exactly where he is and what he's doing. And it's going to get more and more obvious. So much so that even the never Trump evangelicals, the never Trump Christians, which is like the never Jesus Galileans, as far as I'm concerned, the people that couldn't see God's deliverance, God's help right in front of them, they wanted to fight against it, or they are holding their nose and complaining about it, or they're accusing people like me and you of being overly zealous. I think even they're coming around to realizing the lunacy of their opposition. Because, he may not have been the most polite civic representative for the Sanhedrin, but he was the cop that was keeping, the gangs off the streets. So now Trump's gone and the gangs are roving wild. Point being, the good news. Where's the good news, Lance? The leash. I'm hearing the dink on the leash. I'm realizing that the enemy goes, think he's going to run so far. I'm not sure that the HR 1 thing is going to work because they got to get rid of a filibuster. You know what the filibuster is? That's the rule in the Senate. That when you got the Congress is a 2-year cycle. You know why? Because the founders, in their infinite wisdom, knew that emotions in the populace can run high on a subject that could be any issue, could be exciting the fervor of the population. So every 2 years, they have an outlet to go and express their priorities through their representatives called congressmen and congresswomen. However, the Senate is a more deliberative body. They were supposed to be of cooler heads. And so the hot water of the 2-year congressional cycle gets poured into the 6-year term of office of the Senate. The Senate, by nature, is a more philosophic and contemplative. Theoretically, they are subject to the 2-year hot cycle of boiling over passions and purposes. They have 6 years. They're only up for election in the 6 years. So they're not having this short election cycle of working for a couple of months and then trying to get reelected. They can think about the long-term implications of what they're doing, whether it's good for the country, good for their people, good for them, and good for their getting reelected. They got to resell themselves in 6 years. So this kind of puts the brakes on the passions of the crazy Congress. Now, that's why Congress is easy to take back in an election cycle. Senate's a little bit more of a chess game. Right now, we're at 50-50. Somehow, America voted in all those congressmen. That's my point, is why is God letting all this happen? Why didn't God let Donald Trump win? Well, because I think God said America's got so much problems that I'm not going to put it on Donald Trump to try to stop it. They're just going to flood him anyway. I think the church needs to rise up. I think my people need to rise up. I think we need to know what is evil, what is good, what is right, what is wrong. I think my people need courage and strength rather than protection and cowardice. And so we're having to get stronger. We're having to get smarter. We're having to do our actual civic duty, which is to be the government on his shoulders, should be on our shoulders, and we should be shouldering that burden alongside the civic servants that we should hold accountable, we should elect, and many of us should be probably more involved with government in the first place, much to the horror of the people out there that can't stand the thought of Christians being in the neighborhood. So the point that I'm making is the good news is that filibuster would have to be removed for HR 1. Filibuster is what taps the brakes in the Senate. That making sense so far? The filibuster is when a senator can get up and and can represent his party and begin, speaking, and they keep on going on, and basically they're running the clock. It's almost like in a ball game where you see them jumping on the ball and holding it while the clock's going out. In other words, it's a way of killing that which we do not have consensus on in the Senate, because if it's passionate and nutty in Congress, it goes to the more deliberative, contemplative body of the Senate, and the Senate has to have at least 60 votes in order for them to close out that filibuster. Filibusters basically is running the clock. And unless you can get 60 votes out of that 100 members in the Senate, with just a little bit over 50, unless you can get 60 votes out of that Senate, then what they do is they technically can put aside that legislation and force the Senate to have to negotiate more realistically to advance something that they can all agree on. That's how it ought to be. There should never be a government where if you get 51% of the vote, you can destroy the other 49% of the people. This is how the Democrats are, by the way. If they can get 51%, they'll roll over. I mean, they put the barbed wire up, and who needs a barbed wire? You know where we needed it? We needed it around city halls and around courts in Portland and in Seattle, where there was months of rioting and firebombing and police in the hospital. But no. These actors and actresses trying to weave a national narrative to deceive the nation in Washington and in the media. They want to make it look like the Washington needs to be protected from somebody, not the people that actually were burning down buildings and blowing up limousines at Trump's inauguration. No, did you see, by the way, the burning of limousines and blowing up of things and they breaking down a Starbucks with 100 arrests at the Biden inauguration? No. As a matter of fact, all you saw was the dubious circumstances of January 6th with the frustration of half of America having to go through weeks of what was predicted to be a stolen election and then watch it kind of happen in front of their eyes. And even then, we still are examining who was responsible for what on that day. And depending on how much you trust the institutions of the CIA, the FBI, and the Department of Justice, you can assume that they're doing a thorough and unbiased job of getting the facts. But since no real great facts are coming out, you can assume they haven't found the facts they're looking for yet. So the narrative that I'm saying has been so bad is about to shift. The filibuster. Mitch McConnell, of all people, came out and said, you guys want to end the filibuster? When I was in charge of the Senate majority and we had the House, Donald Trump would be calling me all the time saying, why don't you do something? Do something. Well, we have it. We could get that wall done. We could do these things. We could just, well, we have all three branches of government. Let's get done the American people's job. McConnell said no, because there's still a rule in the Senate that we are a body that represents the whole nation. And if 50% of the Senate is represented by voters that don't agree with us, we have to move with more deliberation on the agenda that we have. And so you could get frustrated with Mitch. You could say how useless. Understand something. All that Schumer's doing right now is what we wanted Mitch to do, which was do something with the win that we gave you and accomplish something. The problem is the radical nature of what the left wants to accomplish, everything from packing the Supreme Court to adding more senators to legalizing 20 million new voters to opening up our borders to bankrupting America with what's already been $6 trillion of COVID monopoly money spread around to their Democrat causes. This is like, a diabetic loose in a candy store. They shouldn't be anywhere near this stuff. These people are going to spend us into an early grave. But that doesn't matter. What matters is that McConnell said, if you go there when I could have done it and I never did it, if you don't have the self-restraint to do that, then all right, you go ahead and mess with that filibuster. You take that 60 vote needed to, end the filibuster, and you go ahead and just run with a simple majority of 51 votes, or, because it's so balanced on a knife's edge right now, which is our fault. We should never let the country get that close to self-destruction. Then McConnell said, I'm going to give you a 100-car pileup. Very unusual language for Mitch, because, this guy puts you to sleep for trying to even provoke a fight. So he said a 100-car pileup. What does he mean? Well, he means that would basically mean that no senator was going to participate at all in the voting, and the Republicans would just withdraw from the governing process of the Senate unless they could do it together as a deliberative, contemplative body, as the American founders, as the founders saw, then nothing's going to advance. In other words, he's going to attempt now. How can he do that? What is a 100-car pileup? I don't know, but it means that they're going to, they can get lost in the details of process on anything, and it'll be kind of interesting to see where that goes. Nice to know that Mitch isn't rolling over on that one. Now, the good news. I kept on teasing out the good news. Here's the good news. Mike Lindell. Oh, let's pause and change the subject for a second. Mike Lindell has spent, how are our stats over here? We got 3,000 people live. Thanks for being with me on this Saturday afternoon. Beautiful afternoon here. And but I want to just give you this update because this is the week in review. This is like the way to see what's really happening. Mike Lindell has taken on, as you know, the tech giants, the software giants that refuse to budge an inch on the software arguments they're making for that every comment on foreign interference, etc., is irrelevant and untrue. And so what did they do? I think they sued Sidney Powell. I think go after Mike Lindell. Mike Lindell says, "Come on, bring it on." Mike's wild this way. You got to pray for this guy. You got to love this guy. I mean, if history's door for our generation, this awakening and the resistance to evil is coming down to Donald Trump here, Sidney Powell there, to get Mike Flynn out of his trap that they set up for him in the government, and Mike Lindell. And so with a few brave patriots like this, Lindell is pursuing his case. He wants a forensic audit of these computers, these devices. He wants to see the machinery that was used in the election. And you guys that have been praying. Remember I said the devil's on a chain? Well, I think there's a limit to how long and how far he can go, but God's accomplishing the agenda of unmasking the nation's real condition. And it's showing us it's worse than we thought. It's unmasking our condition, which most of the churches refuse to even open up. I hate to say the dirty little secret, but most of them are making enough money off of Zoom calls with lower costs of operating their campuses, so they're cash flow positive, and they're not in a hurry to open up, even though the neglecting of the assembling of people together is a violation of the Bible. They don't feel any urgency to have to lead that attack. So I think the church's condition is being exposed to all of us as being very weak and in many ways very inexcusable. So what does that do? That creates the aha that explains why God didn't intervene the way we wanted to. The church itself needs a little bit of exposure. So what's happening with Mike Lindell is that Arizona, I believe, is going to be the one place we've been praying for. We have been waffling up there in Wisconsin. There was a great case that was being developed. There was a Michigan case that was being developed, but I'm sorry to say, I didn't want to put it on the news. I was going to cover it, but then I inquired and I realized there was some weakness in the parties involved. I didn't know if they were going to be able to stand up against the pressure of the backlash to do their job, to expose what they want to expose, to take on the election questions and the fraud accusations that they were making and really push the issues. But I believe in Arizona, you have a different case. In Maricopa County, I've been watching with great interest because they made a mistake. Somebody played too hardball with one of the government officials in Arizona, and the woman who I believe is in charge of the Arizona Senate, Republican, who's extremely experienced, basically, along with the judge, pushed back vigorously and said, "No, we're going to go ahead and we're going to go ahead and look at these systems. We're going to guarantee election integrity." So Arizona, you may very well be the first key in a great process, because what we have to do is a forensic analysis of the ballots to see if the many ballots that went in, how many of those could have been automated, could have been run off of a printer, could have the same digital fingerprints on them that would prove that they were all replicated mechanically rather than being original. Well, that would be interesting. So we're going to see. We don't know yet. We're going to find out. Ballots are all processed by Dominion scanners, I believe, in Arizona. But then the forensic machinery itself, the hardware, is going to be looked at. And all hardware has a history. which means that any altering, any playing with, any finagling with the data or shifting the data around in Maricopa County, the most Republican county in all of Texas, the most conservative county in all, I'm sorry, in all of Arizona, the most conservative county in all of Arizona, the most Republican county, and it happens to be where I believe the Attorney General for the state is located. So there's a lot of support politically for this process. That means that as we are praying, we might just have our day when data is going to come forth. And it'd be interesting to see if data does come forth proving that not only was it up in Michigan and Antietam County, but it's going to be in Maricopa County, that the results in Arizona would be changed for the election. Now, of course, you could kind of say, well, then we want to try to march on to other states for other applications. May happen. I'd love to see what goes on in Georgia, but the problem is it was the legislators themselves that didn't do their job. They allowed the courts to change. They allowed the Democrats to hijack and override their legislative authorities. And so you have different problems in different states. They're not all focused on the software, although I'm sure that this software situation, if proven true in Arizona, is going to evolve into other applications. Now, I'm not in any way trying to feed the speculation that this is going to lead to a reversal of the election results, because that's not in the sequence of events. That is the natural path following this. But what it does do is it starts to a big prairie fire underneath the butts of everybody who would want to push an H.R. 1, federalize the election, because that's just going to create more opportunities for this. That's why this is so important. And it could be that fraud in one state could lead possibly to other aggressive reforms in other states. Point being, by 2022, with all the bad news, including the economic impact of increased taxes, increased crime, you know that they had caught 3 potential terrorists coming in from Yemen, and they had discovered a number of Iranian government, sinister Iranian operatives coming in through the border, that the